Hello and welcome to my Mass Effect Andromeda multiplayer wishlist. So I'm going to try and keep this list as realistic as possible, so in that respect it's not even much of a wish list, more of a list of requests and improvements based on previous games. While I think we would all like to see a completely bug-free game with monthly DLCs for years on end, it's probably not going to happen. I'm also going to be drawing comparisons to BioWare's second multiplayer outing, Dragon Age Inquisition, as well as Mass Effect 3 multiplayer in this video. So let's get into it, shall we? So first, and by far the most ridiculous and infuriating issue in BioWare multiplayer titles, netcoding. I think this is a pretty obvious one, since Mass Effect 3 had some of the worst netcoding I think I've ever come across in any game ever, and somehow not only did BioWare not learn a single thing from that abomination, they actually managed to make it worse when Dragon Age multiplayer came out. So, for the uninitiated, Mass Effect 3 had a whole variety of connection issues. Disconnects, infinite loading screens, and sometimes just flat out not being able to connect to certain players for seemingly no reason was not an uncommon thing to happen. This did get better as patches came out, but on the whole the playing experience between the host and client was significantly different, to the point where certain characters or weapons were just not viable options as clients. At least you could connect to people in different regions though. Dragon Age multiplayer actually region locked their matchmaking because the netcoding was so abominable. So if you are unfortunate enough to live in a somewhat remote area, you couldn't even play with other people. The workaround for this was to populate your friends list who also play the game in close regions to you, I guess, have them set up a lobby, enter the game, and then you could join their session and just hope that the game just didn't kick you out. If by some miracle this actually worked, you could play the game. You'd be rubber banding all over the place, lagging everywhere, and it wouldn't even be close to what I would consider an acceptable playing experience, but hey, at least you're playing the game with other people. Unfortunately, this was just one of Dragon Age Inquisition's many online technical issues. Crashes, disconnects, freezes, rubber banding, invisible walls and enemies, invincible enemies forcing you to lose all progress, players unable to use attacks or even move were far more common than it should have been. Since BioWare seemed reluctant to put up dedicated service, what I can only assume is a financial decision, the only thing I can hope for is that the peer-to-peer system will be drastically improved. And I mean, come on, look at games like Borderlands, Halo, or even Call of Duty, which has been around for over 10 years now. All of these games have peer-to-peer systems, and they give generally a good experience to both hosts and clients alike. It's not identical, but I mean, it's passable at least. This really, in my opinion, needs to be a very high up on the priority list, since what we have experienced so far is quite frankly unacceptable to me. So, since this isn't a rant video, let's move on. My next request isn't as pressing as the first, but it's still a pretty big deal to me, and that is in-game text chat. This is a feature which I'd say 95% of online multiplayer games have built in as standard, at least on the PC. I understand this isn't such a prevalent feature on the console, so maybe that's why we haven't had it, just so all titles look the same across all platforms, but I really see absolutely no reason as to why the PC version of the game can't have this. Mass Effect 3 had it in the beta, and it can even be activated through commands, but for some bizarre reason this was cut prior to final release. Dragon Age didn't have it either for pretty much no reason, forcing users to use the Origin chat rooms feature, meaning people like myself who don't want a resource-sucking, buggy, and generally not very helpful overlay need to manually tab out of a game to read the chat, type and send what I want, and then tab back in. If you don't have another monitor like I'm fortunate enough to have, then this just isn't a viable solution, obviously, because you're not going to be looking at the game while you're doing all of this. It's not a complex thing to code in as far as I'm aware, and it would be hugely beneficial to pretty much all people for all kinds of reasons, so my question is, why does this not exist already, and please can it exist in Mass Effect Andromeda's multiplayer? Next on my list of wants is dynamic maps. So what do I mean by dynamic maps? Well, think battlefields, and the kind of destruction, environmental destruction that you get in that game. I want to crush bosses with falling buildings. I want to have grenades blowing holes through walls to escape hordes of enemies behind me. I want to activate traps, lock down doors, or create my own choke points with destroyed environment. with Frostbite 3 being the new engine for Mass Effect, this may not be as far-fetched of an idea as it initially sounds. We saw some limited destruction in Dragon Age Inquisition, and I can only hope that this is built on. We know BioWare's going to be pushing the limits of the engine, so hopefully we'll see some over-the-top Michael Bay-style things going on with the maps. Vehicles is the next thing I'd like to see in multiplayer, and I'm not talking about maybe having the Mako on certain maps in certain situations. I mean, I would like to be able to control precision airstrikes, bombing runs, or maybe even going as far to control things like dropships or shuttles to reach objectives faster. Of course, we would need much larger maps to accommodate this. Maybe not battlefield-size maps, but at least a lot bigger than the arena-style maps we already have. And this idea of larger maps brings me to my next and final request, and that's co-op missions. So, in my previous video, I said that co-op missions were rumoured to be a thing, and honestly, I really hope they are. As great as the original wave-based Horde mode is, I think many of us wanted something a little more than that. I mean, it was good, but let's be honest, it did get kind of repetitive at times. Co-op missions or even a full-blown story mode, though this is probably unlikely, would be a great addition to the online mode. Missions could just be linear in design but have RNG elements to keep things fresh, kind of similar to how Payday 2 designs their heists. Story mode could be simply as simple as allowing your friends to be squad mates in single-player side quests, or just having side quests that follow the single-player storyline but in multiplayer. This could potentially link in with your single-player campaign, though I imagine most people would probably prefer single-player to be a completely separate entity to multiplayer, myself included. So, that's pretty much it. That's my requests and wishes for the next Mass Effect game. Honestly though, I would be very happy with a remake of Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, because I think if something's not broken then there's no need to fix it. But I think that would be good with a shitload of new maps, characters, enemies, and weapons. So really, all that I ask, and that's the only thing I ask, is that I don't have to jump through hoops with bootleg network fixes and solutions to be able to play with my friends. I would probably be very happy with pretty much anything other than that. So, thanks for watching, goodbye.